Welcome to Taking Stock. I'm Amanda Lang. Coming up on the show, is the federal government overly rosy in its projections for economic growth? Some experts think so. And rising debt costs threaten to overwhelm many. We have some advice. Plus, the debate about private delivery of health care may be missing the point. That's all ahead. First, for the week that was in business, it's time for the briefs. The Bank of Canada raised rates again, its 8th consecutive increase to 4.5%. The central bank did say it plans to hold rates here while it assesses the impact of previous hikes, noting that the risk of recession is about equal to the potential for moderate growth in the economy. The bank thinks inflation will fall to 3% by mid-year, but says it will raise rates again if that doesn't happen.
With today's modest increase, we expect to pause rate hikes while we assess the impacts of the substantial monetary policy tightening already undertaken.
One thing we do know, prices at grocery stores will likely rise in February. A warning from Metro, one of the country's largest chains, that price pauses generally held over the Christmas period are coming to an end, and that grocers face thousands of pent-up price increases from suppliers. Renters in Canada face the toughest market in more than 20 years, according to new data from the housing regulator. CMHC said vacancy rates fell to 1.9% last year in purpose-built rentals, while rent prices surged as climbing mortgage rates kept people in the rental market longer. And a warning this week from a former central bank governor. David Dodge said the feds may be underestimating how much it will have to spend to meet its own budget promises, and that a recession which derails its revenue assumptions would likely mean higher deficits ahead if it kept those spending promises. 120,000 public servants could be set to strike in the months ahead, as negotiations with the government over pay increases appear to have stalled. The workers, including those at Canada Revenue Agency, as well as administrative workers and a host of others, were hoping for pay raises that range from just above 2% a year to more than 8% in the case of the tax employees. A big telecom merger took a step closer to reality as a court denied the Competition Bureau's request to squash Rogers' takeover of Shaw. Assuming approval from the federal government, the deal is set to close by the end of January, effectively dropping the number of national players in wireless back to 3. The competition commissioner had argued it will be a bad deal for consumers, as reduced market pressure turns into higher prices for shoppers. Meanwhile, the U.S. Department of Justice sued Google this week, alleging that it's using its market dominance in digital advertising to stifle competition. It joins a host of U.S. states who have already taken on Google for anti-competitive practices. The U.S. government is arguing Google should be forced to sell some of its ad businesses. And those are your business briefs. Well, both the Bank of Canada and the federal government may have a rosier view of Canada's economy than some private sector economists. What is the risk that they have it wrong? Goldy Hyder is president and CEO of the Business Council of Canada. Great to see you, Goldy.
Good to be with you.
So we do have this concern being voiced, and a study done for the Business Council, David Dodge, former central banker, saying that the assumptions might be a little overly rosy. What is the risk of that? They've made some promises. Will they be able to afford to deliver them, I guess, is the big question.
Yeah, I mean, the report basically says, look, the government's projections are plausible, but they are somewhat optimistic. And that's just about being prudent. We don't know what lies ahead. The same people who told us that inflation would be short are telling us that the recession will be short and shallow. We don't know. And so we have to plan better for that. And what the report really does is to indicate to the government, be careful, be prudent, be smart, be prepared, be pragmatic, and give yourself some flexibility. And the reason the report, I think, has drawn a lot of attention is because there's a history here. And the history here is of a government that has actually spent a lot more than it ever said it's going to spend. The deficits we know have increased significantly outside of COVID. So that's a concern that we need to watch carefully.
And of course, watching it because we're all concerned about what a recession might, if it does appear, what it does look like. What's your sense among your constituents at the Business Council of what they're thinking? What do Canadian business leaders think is going to happen?
I think there's a general belief forming that it should be a short and shallow one, but we don't know. I think there's this notion of a safe landing. A lot of people are questioning that, in fact, there will be a bumpy landing. The question is how many bumps and how small are those bumps or how large are they? We don't know. What we need to do is be prepared. And that means making sure that you have a growth strategy to accompany your spending strategy as well. No one is saying don't spend, but the things that you're investing in should enable growth, trade enabling infrastructure, reskilling your workforce. Those kinds of things that generate a return is what's going to be necessary to best manage this risk.
We know that the central bank is intent on taming inflation. They may hold here as they see how the hikes so far have worked, but they've said if it doesn't work, we'll hike again. Will there be a temptation in a spring budget for the government to spend in order to be seen to be helping people with affordability, Goldy, which would run a little contrary to what our central bank's trying to achieve?
Yeah. Well, I think they did that in the last budget, and there's no need to do it again, right? Because what Canadians are saying is if there is such a recession coming, we're going to be tightening our belts, and we actually expect our government to lead by example and do the same thing. You know, governing is hard. It's about making choices, and I think this is a budget that comes at a very serious time, and that they need to think about this in the context of Canada's competitiveness and how it is that we can control our own destiny and manage the risks that are coming. It doesn't mean you just let it arrive. You do what you can. Why do we have interprovincial trade barriers in this country? These are examples of things that are suppressing growth at a time when we need it.
Not a lot of time here, but should we expect more layoffs from corporate Canada? We haven't seen that many outside of a sector or two, really tech only.
Yeah, I think it's a tech-driven thing, Amanda, to be honest. Most of the members I speak with are still looking for labor. They're competing for labor with the public sector that's offering lucrative arrangements. The private sector needs talent. We're really pleased by the government's decision to increase the immigration levels, but that also means they got to fix the system in order to process those immigrants to be able to get here. Most of our problems, Amanda, are labor-related, whether it's healthcare, whether it's airports, housing. They're all labor issues.
Goldy, so good to have you. Always appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Great to see you.
Goldy Hyder, President and CEO of the Business Council of Canada. Coming up, more Canadians are financially vulnerable. So what's the best way to help? Stay with us.